I'm going to get my mic.
Gonna be?
I don't know that I even need a mic, but I'll do the mic.
I'm going to introduce.
No, you're not.
I'll introduce you.
Okay. Do you want that?
No.
Okay.
We're going to get started, everybody. It is 3:45, and it is beautiful outside.
Amy.
And so for the next 30, 45, depending on how many questions there are, Mr. Van Orney, our new business manager, will take you through the preliminary budget that has been created at this point. And the purpose of this meeting is to walk through the preliminary budget and present to you basically what we know or assume at this time. Intent of this is to be interactive, and so feel free to ask questions. If Mr. Van Orney can ask any of the questions here, I encourage you guys, everybody, to either follow up, schedule a meeting, and so Mr. Van Orney will get into that a little bit later on. So without further ado, thank you guys for being here, and we'll turn it over.
Thank you for, whoa, this is loud. Thank you for having me here this afternoon. As Josh said, this is what our, we're going to present the preliminary proposed budget, and that's exactly what it is. It's preliminary and it is proposed. The school board is the one that sets the budget. The administration proposes one, but they're the ones that set the budget. They approve it in July, usually, or August. And then we'll go from there. So what I want to do is just present the budget as in the format that I have come up with, and the board has endorsed some extemporaneous information that goes with it. Again, if you have questions during the process, let me know. If I don't know the answer, maybe one of the board members or Josh would be able to help you, or I can follow up with you. So, I know that is really small, but you have it in your handout as well, so you might want to follow along. General fund revenue budget, what I've done is I have 16-17 on the far left. That's the actual 16-17, actual 17-18. Then the next 3 years are budget. This year I have the budget for 18-19. I don't have actual because we're not done yet. So, and then I have the budget, proposed budget for next year and the year after. First one is property taxes. That's a biggie for us. School board levies about 70 mills. This has been for a number of years for the general fund. So what I did is I took, if you go to the next slide, here's evaluations for the Valley City Public Schools since the year 2012. You can see the percentage increases. They've been somewhat steady, 2.86, 6.4, you can kind of. So what I did is I took the 4.06, which was last year's increase, and plugged that into the budget. And again, remind you that this has not been approved by the board, so this is not set in stone. They can do with it what they wish. I just put in the new valuation of 4.06% increase in valuation times the 70 mills. That's how we got the $2,786,000 for next year. Did the same percentage for 2021. Okay. Tuition property taxes, I did the same. Miscellaneous property taxes, I did the same. Did that 4.06% increase. Tuition, we'll get into that. Other tax revenue, tax interest revenue, those are all variables. It involves railroads, it involves all kinds of interesting things that they give us tax monies on. So that varies from A to Z. The rest of the fees, I left them pretty much the same. The other one I want to point out is special reserve transfer, which is the last of the local. School board each year transfers $125,000 from the special reserve fund to general fund to help cover operating expenses, and that's basically what the special reserve fund is for. You can use it to pay utilities, salaries, those types of things. And so each year there's a special reserve levy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and we transfer some of that money $125,000 in the general fund to help with that expense. The pupil aid, let me get to state sources. Pupil payment, regular ed, $8,251,000. Obviously, the legislature is still meeting. So I figured a 2% increase in foundation aid from what we are getting this year. Okay? It's not based on what the budget is because we're not getting the budgeted amount because of all kinds of variables that take place in that payment schedule. So I figured a 2% increase for next year and the year after, just to put a number in there. Once the yes, go ahead.
So Tom, so the per pupil payment then is based on our current enrollment. Can you talk about that just briefly in terms of how that relates to how you budgeted that?
The pupil payment is an enrollment-based payment. It's based on enrollment. Valley City enrollment is, I hate to say flat, but it's staying where it is. It's not going up and down a lot at this point in time. So I just did the flat 2%. I plugged in numbers, and there's a whole worksheet you can go through. And I think when I plugged in the numbers as I thought they might be, enrollment numbers for the year, it's like a $6,000 or $7,000 difference. So I just put in the 2%. Because the enrollment's going to be about the same, because we get paid on this year's numbers next year. So we're always a year behind. If anybody wants to go through that formula sheet, it's a very complicated process, and those of you that have seen it, it's complicated. There's a lot of variables in it. So, same thing with summer school and pre-K special ed, 2% increase in those from what we are getting this year. Transportation, I left flat. I don't know that there's no increase from the state. I don't know that our ridership has gone up or down a lot. So I think that's going to be pretty close. Same thing with vocational education aid. Federal sources, those are monies that we use for Title I, we use for disadvantaged youth and educating them. Title II is classroom size reduction to bring those down. Title IV has been moved into Title II for classroom size reduction. The total on that is $487,000. I left it the same as last year. We got notification last week. I think it's going up $5,000 or $7,000. I can't remember, but a relatively small amount. I did not change the budget with that yet, but that won't affect any of the programs that are funded with federal dollars. So, questions on the revenue? Yep. Oh, yes. What we get, well, they start out with $96.46 per pupil, and we've been getting that. That's the same for 3 years now. They're saying it's going to be a 2% increase. So $96.46 per student. But then there's additions and deletions to that $96.46, so that's not the actual number that we get paid on. And that's that whole worksheet that you work your way through. But again, foundation aid has stayed the same rate for 3 years now. This shows where the revenue came from or comes from. State funds 67% of the programs that we have. 29% of it comes from local, which is basically property taxes. And the state, again, is their foundation aid program. And then federal is 4%. Those are the federal dollars we get. Next, we're going to go into, where's my mouse? We're going to go into expenditures here. This is just for the general fund. There's other funds that we're going to talk about later and what they are. Oh, it didn't show up. Why is it not showing up? Does anybody know?
You go out of the PowerPoint, correct?
Yep. I went out of the PowerPoint or hyperlink. It worked before. Amy, any idea? Well, while she's working on that, you guys have it in front of you. I don't know. We're going to start out, again, it's the same concept. Actual 16-17, actual 17-18, budget for the next 3 years. Professional development, first one. It looks like we haven't been doing PD for 3 years, but we have been. The previous years, it's been broke out by building. And we didn't see a need to really break it out by building. We're going to do PD district-wide and not break it down by building. Because some of the PD overlaps, so we're having to divide it a lot. So we're going to put PD as a district item, and I'll show you where it's taken out of the individual buildings. Under Board of Education, the staff personal sick leave payout is the first thing I want to talk about. That's for sick leave that's paid out to teaching staff, personal leave to classified staff, but that's a small amount. It's basically sick leave to teaching staff that are leaving the district. I budgeted $25,000, which is the equivalent of basically 5 teachers leaving with the max amount of payment that they can receive, which is $5,000 per teacher. So it's just a guess. You can see what it's been in the past, $33,000, and it's $7,000. So it's an estimate on our part. Next one is health insurance. It's $270, Board of Education $270. This year we budgeted $1,007,000. Next year we're budgeting $1,199,000. Blue Cross has informed us that we can expect a 14 to 19% increase in premiums next year. So what I did is I took the 19%, the highest, times the budgeted amount for 18-19 and put that in the budget. And I also put in 19% for 2021. Oh, here it is, but it's too big. We have to shrink it down here. How do we do that? What's that? There we go. Yeah. So, questions on health insurance. It is what it is. I think it's a lot higher than any of us expected at this point. Dental insurance, they say the dental premiums are going to go up 2%. So I put a 2% increase for dental. That's more palatable to me than 19%. I don't have any other comments on Board of Education. Superintendent's office. The only thing I want to talk about there maybe is under the superintendent's office, which is the central office also, there's the natural gas. It's a 621 account number. So I called the people there too, the people responsible for those natural gas, electricity, utilities, and it was a 2.1 to 2.7% increase is what they're looking for next year. So, and I don't have which is which, but one was 2.0, one was 2.1, one was 2.7. So if you see there under natural gas, under the central office administration building, I did not increase it because in looking in what we've spent this year, even with a 2% increase, we're still going to be within budget. So a few of the buildings went up a little bit, but others did not. So. Second page, if you go to Hannah Field, which is right there, we increased all the expenses basically at Hannah Field because with the new track going in down there, we're not sure what the expenses are going to be. We assume they're going to go up because of the increased usage and just stuff that we're going to need down there for that. And so we increased the expense, just the upkeep expense on Hannah Field just a little bit to maybe make that fit. Transportation services is right below that. We contracted a bus fleet with Dietrich. Last year it was $330,000. This year it's going to $353,000, represents a 7% increase. That's under contract, so we knew what that dollar amount was right from the get-go. Let's go down to instructional media, which is on the bottom of that page. talks about technology equipment. This is kind of Brian Prewald's area. You see we budgeted $180,000 last year for equipment, $15,000 for cameras. This year we left the budget at $195,000 but put it all in equipment because we don't anticipate spending that money for cameras this year. But with the Bridge Ed program, there's additional expenses with that. So that's why that went up. On page 3 then, if you go to the technology coordinator, Brian's going to have a summer help. He's going to have a student come in and help him this summer pull wire and climb ladders and clean all the devices that the students turn in. So he'll be more than busy. When it gets down to kindergarten instruction, let's go there. That went from 200 to 243, 200,000 to 243,000. First off, on salaries, what I did with salaries is I left, there's no increase of any kind granted, no step, no percent increase or anything. I left everybody as they were, certified and classified, and administration. Then I took out the people that are leaving and put in the people that are coming in. Okay? So the exception is kindergarten, with 87 students now registered for kindergarten for next fall. We have 4 sections. The board has not done anything with this. They're aware of it. We have took the liberty to put the 5th teacher in the budget at this point. The numbers aren't there come fall or come when they want to make the decision. You know, it's their decision to add that. I've just put it in the budget. Okay. So the other salaries are the same way then. When you get down to guidance and principal, there's no increase. So you see then, if you go down to Jefferson instruction, the salaries there, you see they went down. That's because of the change in staff. With Jefferson, there's teachers leaving, new teachers coming in. You know, they're getting paid less, so that reflects that. Again, para salaries stayed the same. Substitute teachers, what I did there, it's a variable. Some buildings had more maternity than others this year, so it's a variable. But what I want to say is I took the 5-year average for each building, took that average, and then took it times 10%. So it's 110% of the 5-year average for substitute teachers. That's a tough one to budget for, because sometimes you can be way over, sometimes you can be way under. And I'll show you one of them that it varies a lot. If you go down to PD under Jefferson instruction, it's the 310. That one again doesn't have any money in it this year because we put it district-wide. So there's none listed by building, if that makes sense. Page 4, the next page. If you want to go down to operation and maintenance of plant under Jefferson, you will see the utilities are listed there. Again, same thing, they stayed the same, they didn't change because of what we're spending this year, I think is going to fit within the budget, even with the increase for next year. Go down to Washington instruction, toward the bottom of page 4. You have the Apple Learning Academy. The current year we're in, the teachers down there participated in it. Next year, it's going to be high school teachers participating in it. So there's a line item for this year. Next year, there's not. When we get to the high school, you'll see that there is a line item for the Apple Learning Academy. And I realize this is a lot of numbers, a lot of data. Go to page 5. Top of page 5, it talks about Washington instruction. And I'm going to talk about textbooks a little bit. We met with the principals, came up with what we thought would be an accurate figure for next year. Some stayed the same, some went down, depending on what their needs are for the next year. So I think, what was Washington? Yeah, Washington was 47.5 this year. because of the new curriculum. I think it's math. Am I right on that? Math, Chad? Yeah, math curriculum that they're looking at. Next year they won't be doing that, so it went down to 10. Same thing under operation maintenance plant with Washington toward the bottom of page 5. It's the same scenario. We did those percentages. You go to page 7 now. If you go toward the bottom, you see student tuition, the 140, 1999. That's tuition we pay to other LEAs other LEAs for instruction of students placed outside of our district that are not special needs. To special needs students, they're paid by the Cheyenne Valley Special Education Unit. There was nothing budgeted this year, and there hasn't been anything budgeted for years in that line item. So I budgeted $25,000 for the next 2 years. It varies a lot depending on, because you can have a student placed out of district for a number of days, or weeks, or even the whole year, and it's going to cost you. Some of the residence facilities are quite high. So it's a variable, but it's a number to put in there. At least we have something to start with. The bottom of page 7, high school guidance. We don't have any salary line items in there. It's not that we don't have guidance in the high school. It's just that Mona went from being our employee to the vocational center's employee. They get a higher reimbursement rate for her salary. That's why she was transferred there. Page 8. If you go to SVSEU Special Education, the Cheyenne Valley Special Education Unit, we pay tuition for the services they render us. This year, we're paying them $282,000. Next year, we budgeted $290,000, which was a 2.5% increase. Yesterday, Tracy Zahn, the director, has stated that probably might be low. But we haven't got another figure from Tracy, so that's where we're at right now with that. If you go down to, then we have the federal programs. They're the same. Again, the expenditures and the revenue are exactly the same, so it's an in and an out. Again, it's last year's figures. We have this year's figures, we just haven't plugged them in. Vocational programs, the SVACTC tuition of $592. That's an actual figure given to us by Jeff Bope of $343,500 for next year. And I did an equal increase for the following year. Then you get to extracurricular and all the 501s, all the 500s down to 517. Those are transportation services provided by Dietrich's for extracurricular programs. I went back and did a 5-year history on all of these and came up with an average of what it has been in the past. So that's why some of them are a little higher, some are maybe lower. Most of them are higher, unfortunately, but some are lower based on their usage. The last page, if you go to the very last column, the very last line, it has the total expenditures out of the general fund. Next year, $12.7 million. The year after would be just over $13 million. Any questions on that expenditure budget?
Tom, can you go back to page 6?
Yep.
That is the junior high school instruction. And we point out, maybe I was asleep and missed it, but the professional development Apple Academy.
Yes.
And then also Canvas. And
Okay.
then talk about the student body deficit.
Okay. First off is the Apple Learning Academy. Again, that was Washington this year. It's gonna those teachers are now going to go into high school, so going to that academy. So that's why it's moved from Washington to the high school. That's why it's a new item there. Student body deficit, that's for extracurricular or sports programs that run negative, and they can't end negative at the end of the year. So the general fund has to supplement the expenses that take place in there. There's a couple big ones. One is speech, and we all know speech is a hard program to generate money in. It just doesn't naturally. Student Congress is another one. It's just hard to generate money for Student Congress. So those are some of the big ones. There's some smaller ones. Most of the athletic programs they kind of make their own. So that's what the student body deficit is. What was the other one, Mr. Johnson?
Canvas.
Oh, the Canvas. There's some software changes. Mr. Krewald went through and found out, and with the principals, who was using what software, who was not using the software that we currently have. If we're not using it, we got rid of it. And there is some in there that we got rid of. There's some that we added. And the Canvas is an add, I believe. There's some that we're not using. And an example of that is like under junior high school instruction, HOV fees. It was $9,600 this year. It's on page 6. We're not budgeting anything next year. Vocabulary.com is a program that we're going to start using next year in the high school that we're not using now. And he went through and got costs on all of the software programs that we're using. And so they've been tweaked and adjusted based on what the needs and sometimes wants of what the staff are.
To clarify real quick, on the Heart of the Valley, it's the HOV.
Yeah.
And so we no longer participate in the Heart of the Valley, which is the online consortium through the Career Tech Center. And so that's why that amount won't be included for next year. We haven't expended that money from that account this year either.
Yeah. So that expense probably won't happen this year, that $9,600. Any other comments or questions on the expenditure budget? It's a lot to digest, I know that. See, I gotta get out of this. If I remember right, Amy, we do it this way, right? There's the percent of expenses, just in a chart format. You can see salaries comprise 56% of our budget. Our benefits are 25%. So if you add salary and benefits, it's 81%. When you go, it's funny when you go into the private sector, they cringe at this number because in the private sector it certainly isn't this much. But in a school sector, this is what we have. We have staff. That's our product, is staff and students, and so that's what we budget for. Purchase services is 12%, and that mainly is 3 items that comprise that. It's the transportation services from Dietrich's, it's the tuition to the vocational center, and tuition to the special ed unit. Those are the services. And then the rest, supplies 4%, equipment 2%, fees and dues 1%. Fees and dues is basically software. Equipment is basically technology and some furniture, but mainly technology. Questions on that? So when you add all this together, what do we end up with for money at the end of each year? This current year, again, budget 18-19, that middle column, we're expecting to ending fund balance at $1.9 million, which seems high when you just think about it, but the carryover percentage is 15.37. When you go out and look at what public schools should be having for an interim fund, it's like between 12 to 15, 10 to 15, 13 to 15. It depends on what state you're going at because they vary from state to state somewhat. So we're within that range. Budget 1920, if the board approved today what was presented here, you'd be an $18,000 deficit, and you would have an ending fund balance of $1.9 million again. And then in 2021, you would end with 1.9. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is without anything really to do with salaries and benefits outside of health insurance. So your retirement, all of that salaries are not figured in the budget at this point until negotiations are done. Then they'll be plugged in. Mm-hmm. Yep, 14 to 19% increase. Yeah. And I've chosen to put in 19, just to put in the high end. And really, with self-funded plans, we don't really find out what that number or percentage dollar amount really is until August, is when they determine self-funded plans. Other plans know what it is now, and so they're set in place. They're set for the next year. We have to wait for July because they only have half the year, so they have to wait for most of the year to determine where we're at.
Done.
Yeah, that's it. Questions on the ending fund balance that kind of make sense to people? There's a lot of things in and not in it, so. A couple other funds that I want to talk about.
Tom, I think that was a sign on health insurance that it was just supposed to be done.
I guess. Oh, when I got that email from Mitch from Blue Cross, it was like, oh, ouch, ouch, ouch. Next slide so this was all general fund. This is all what we operate the school with, basically what we operate the school with. Now we're going to talk about some other special funds that we have that can be used for specific purposes. First one I've kind of talked a little bit about, it's special reserve. It's used for payment of salaries and utilities. And in past years, I've understood here that at times, because of cash flow issues with salaries in the fall, they've had to dip into the special reserve fund to pay salaries and lights and utilities. So that's there. That's what that's used for. The building fund, there's really two uses to the building fund. One is the board budgets $200,000 a year for building repairs. So like the new boiler at Washington, if there's a roof repair, if there's door repairs, all that type of stuff, that comes out of the $200,000 for the building fund. The other thing the building fund is used for is payment of bonds. So when the track complex was completed and what was the project before that? The hack here? Those have bonds, or an equivalent is called loans, if you want to call them that. And so we have to pay those off. So you see that the bond, expense building repairs, expense bond repayment. And then special assessments is the third fund. What I want to say about all three of them is the only revenue that's generated in these three funds comes from property taxes. Okay? There's no state monies, it's property tax. That's where this comes from. Special assessments is used exactly what it says. Special assessments within the city. We don't pay property tax, but we do have to pay special assessments. So a lot of this is the youth sports complex. I don't know if there's specials with the streetscape project, if there be specials with that. So we can levy money just to pay for special assessments, and that's all it can be used for. Questions on those three funds? And you really, outside of special reserve transferring into general fund, you really can't transfer the monies in building and special assessments. There's special situations you can, but it's pretty much, you have to use it for what it's designed for, and not much else. We can do a hyperlink again. Now we're going to talk about another fund that we have. Let's see if this works. School Food Service Fund. Again, this is another fund that we use. This runs the hot lunch program, obviously. It generates the money, the only money that it generates, it generates money mainly from two sources, from students or adults that pay for meals, and basically students. And then there is a federal reimbursement for students that eat. And for regular students that eat, if they have lower income, they can have a reduced rate that they pay, and then the government picks up some of that cost. Students can be eligible for free meals, then the government even kicks in more money. So there is a government payout to help us with the food service program. So those are really the two sources of income. And obviously the expenses of salaries and food products, basically. Questions on the school food service fund? Okay. The other one we don't have, we're still working on a budget for it, is the activity fund. That's all the sports, the clubs, the activities, your academic activities like speech and drama and all your athletics. That's the activity fund. And we're working on a budget for that. There hasn't been one in the past, so we're catching up on that one. Again, that's the money generated there basically is gate and student fees and donations. That's where the money comes for that, and then it's spent out. There was no tax dollars. There was no tax dollars for food service. There's no tax dollars for activity fund. So, no federal programs for activity fund, no state monies. It's locally driven.
At this point, there's been conversation about baseball and softball and whether or not
Yep.
the sponsorship of the school. At this point, your budget does not reflect including baseball or softball as a fully sponsored sport, correct?
Correct. What's been done in the past is with baseball and softball both, we have paid the Baseball and Softball Association the equivalent of the head coach as our fee for participating. And you know, with the softball, us sponsoring softball totally within the school this year, there's some assistants that were hired and so on. What I have in the budget is simply the two head coaches. So whether we hire them or the association hires them and we pay them. So there is no change in the softball and baseball coaching that's in there. That's the same. It's just a matter of who we're paying. Good question. Anything else? Clear as mud? Again, it's a lot to digest. If you got questions in the next days, weeks, and months, get hold of me. I know Mr. Johnson would answer your calls. School board members, Amy is back there. She may be able to help you too, or she will be able to help you. If not, she will. Okay.
I think that the one, if I could comment, the one obviously that's puzzling is the health insurance, and the one that is probably frustrating from all different angles. When you look at the 2% increases from the state and the excitement or anticipation of finally getting the increase from the state, we've been flat the last biennium, and so you then get an increase, and then you get hit with a 14 to 19% increase. This coming after we make a change to health insurance with the anticipation that we're not going to see the same kind of increases. And so the health insurance committee last met, Bob, Nancy, what would you say?
3 months ago, maybe?
In
2 months?
January, February? And that was before we had any anticipation of what this number would look like. But part of, I think, the anticipated next step of that is going back to that health insurance committee to say, we got to reevaluate what is either the right plan or options. And again, I don't want to get the cart before the horse relative to that, but it's a conversation that I think is going to have to take place, understanding that under our current 80-20 plan, not only is the 19% increase for the district and the district budget, that 19% increase is for all of our employees as well that are paying that 20% share.
Yeah.
And so that is hard, I understand, relative to the grand scheme of everything.
It's a real killer for the budget. I mean, you put $192,000 back in the budget. Now we can do some things. But right now, that's a killer for the budget, just financially, fiscally. And I'll say this, I think fiscally, I think somebody has to look at that whole health insurance situation and come up with something that's a little bit more feasible, a little bit more economically sound. And I don't know what that answer is. Again, I have no idea what that is. But I think fiscally we have to do something to look at that. And maybe there isn't anything we can do. I don't know. But I think we have a responsibility, the school board and the staff as well, to look at that and just see what options are out there. And maybe there isn't any, but maybe there is. I think we owe that to ourselves to do that. And it's going to hit, as he said, it's going to hit both sides. It's going to hit the employer and the employee. So,
is a year behind. So that's $150,000 additional if you maintain an enrollment or increase by 15 students. The challenge that we're going to have over the next 5 years, so if you compare 2019 to 2024, you maintain an elementary average of 4 sections, where is that going to put us enrollment in the next 5 years? One of the concerns I have right now in our overall enrollment is the current 8th grade class, which is approximately 120 students. Across the district K-12, we're at about 80 students on average. And so there is going to be a gap that we're going to have unless we have some really continuous big classes coming into elementary. And so that is something as a district we're going to just have to plan for in the next 5 years. When that 8th grade class leaves, we're likely going to see a kickback in the amount of state aid that we're going to receive after they graduate. And so that's just planning and making sure that we're preparing for that coming in the next 5 years. But if you look historically, and Joyce reminded me of this when I was sharing my concerns during one of the meetings, that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the same conversation came up about 5 years ago regarding enrollment, and the thought being that, expect to have this big drop, and it didn't happen because you had this influx of students all of a sudden come. So encouragement to everybody is continue to encourage students to come into our district, and manufacturing and families and having more kids, and we'll increase our substitute line item if young teachers want to continue to have kids. Mrs. Zinke is recruiting a young family out of Illinois, and they're bringing 6 kids into the district next year, and so that's a fantastic thing as well.
Well, and you think about it, you could, we have 1,100 students, so we're going to lose 40. So to increase by 40 students, it seems insurmountable, like, oh, we'll never do that. But if you add 6 students over the next 5 years, you have 30 students. So if you bring in 6 more kindergartners and you are graduating, you're going to grow, and then there's going to be that drop when that larger class graduates. That's going to happen. So if, you just pray and hope that we can keep the enrollment we have. Again, that's a variable, but. Questions or comments? Thank you for coming.